Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go through supply again. All right. So last night I had you look at demand again with me. We're going to do the same thing here tonight. So we talked about the law of demand and how demand is influenced by price, but we can't look at just demand without looking at supply. So let's look at supply. So supply, what is it? The ability and willingness of producers to offer products for sale. So last night we took a look at demand, which has to do with the consumer, has to do with you buying things. What are you going to want at each price? Supply has to deal with the producers, the guys making those products. What are they willing to supply and at what prices? Right, so they decide how much to offer. So Nike, Gap, Apple's, Rita's, Honda all decide at what price to supply their products at. So yesterday we talked about the law of demand, which has an inverse relationship, right? One goes up, the other goes down. The law of supply works together. So price goes up, the quantity supplied goes up. If the price goes down, quantity supplied goes down. Why? That doesn't seem to make sense off the top of our head, but it does actually. So as price increases, the producers are making more money off of each product sold. So those companies then can turn around and produce more. Right? This is a direct relationship as opposed to demand, which has that inverse relationship. So there's my fun little graphic for you. Price goes up, quantity supplied goes up. Price goes down, quantity supplied goes down. So the supply curve, this is going to show you at each price point how much the producer is willing to supply. Right? Supply curves are always upward sloping. This shows the quantity that suppliers will supply at each and every price point. So if we were to look at this again, it's upward sloping. So it's a direct relationship. So as the price goes up, the quantity supplied goes up. That's why this is upward sloping, right? Dependent on the cost of production. They're going to offer more at a higher price and less at lower prices. Well, this is obvious because if they offer things at higher prices, they can make more money off of an individual good. One of the motives in a capitalist economy, in our economy, is the profit motive, right? Companies are out to make money. So the more money they make, they will set the price higher. Now, similar to the change in quantity supplied versus change in quantity demanded versus change in demand, the same thing here applies to supply. So change in quantity supplied has to do with the change of the price of the product. Everything else stays the same. Nothing else changes, just the price of the product. Right? This is illustrated similarly as in demand with movement along the curve, meaning you're not creating a new supply curve or new schedule. It's moving along that curve. Now, change in supply is determined by non-priced determinants, meaning something outside of prices happened to affect the supply, hence changing the price and supply. Right. Change in the quantity of the product supplied in response to a change in price. So if the price of an iPhone increases just because they want to make more money, doesn't have anything to do with anything else, the quantity supplied is also going to increase. Right. So that's illustrated here. Price point A, they want to charge more. Price point B, they're going to supply more. Now, when we look at changes in supply, there are different reasons why the supply changes. So we'll look here at cost of input, meaning how much is it going to cost the company to make it. So if the price for, in this example, a t-shirt, if the price for cotton or ink goes down, suppliers can make more at each price, right? So if it costs them $5 to make a shirt originally, but now because of a change in price of cotton, it only costs them $3, they now have $2 extra to make more product. And what are they going to do? They're going to make more product so they can get more product out there so you can buy their shirts. Okay, 2, productivity, meaning if you have a more efficient workforce, then you're going to be able to get more product out there. Supply curve shifts. Technology, meaning if you have new technological advances in manufacturing, then the production cost is going to be lower. So then you're going to see an increase in supply. Number of sellers, right? Competition, one of the founding principles of any capitalist economy, can cause a shift to the right, right? So if there's only Versace and Donna Karan making dresses, and then all of a sudden the Hoskins uh, dress company comes out into the stage there and starts making, there are now 3 sellers instead of 2. So now there's more supply. There's just more people making dresses. Why I chose dresses, I don't know. Suppliers want to sell more at a higher price. Remember that. So number 5 can be taxes and subsidies. So this has to do with the government. It's kind of a macroeconomic concept here. Taxes can cause a shift to the left because it costs them more to create a product, right? So the government's taxing them on their product. Subsidies are payments to businesses. They would cause a shift to the right. So payments to businesses, like the government does this all the time. They give, millions of dollars to certain companies, to farmers, to oil industry, to green energy to get them off the ground. So they now have more money so they can make more product, and it makes a shift to the right. Expectations, right? So if producers expect lower prices in the future, they're going to produce as much as they can and sell as much right now because they want to make more money on the more expensive prices now. Okay. Government regulations, right? The government, we've talked about extensively, regulates everything. The example here being emission regulations on cars, right? So if the cars have to meet certain standards, it's going to cost the companies more to make those cars, right? So I think I talked about the Chevy Volt costs. I think it's gone down and regulated itself, but it originally cost like 40 grand to make, but they were only selling it at 32 grand, so they caused they were losing money every time they made it. So the supply they had shifted to the left because it cost them too much money to make the cars. So I want to go through a couple examples that we did in class. Check your work, and if you have any issues, please let me know. So, right, so here's an example, right? Record peach harvest, price is lowest in a decade. How is this going to affect the supply curve for frozen peaches? Right, so this is being affected by what? A cost and input, right? Because the cost to the supply of peaches has gone up. So you will see more, it's going to be cheaper for the companies to make their peach pies. So you're going to see a shift of the line to the right, increasing, right? Because it's cheaper to make a peach pie. Okay. So car companies close 6 factories. How is this going to affect the supply curve for minivans? Well, there's not as many factories making these minivans, so what's going to happen to the supply? It's going to shift to the left. It's going to decrease, right? There's not as many places making them. It's just an obvious fact that there's not going to be as much product, not as much supply. Okay. Gas prices to stay low this year, rise dramatically next year. How is this going to affect the current supply for gasoline? So if prices are going to rise next year, we're talking about supply, right? So we're talking about the producers, not the consumers. So the supply now is going to be restricted, right? Because producers want to make as much money as possible. So they're going to restrict the amount of supply out there now and wait till the price goes up in 6 months and then put the supply out there because they'll make more money in 6 months. Right? Now, if this were a demand question, the demand would go up, right? So we're seeing pretty low gas prices right now. So the demand is going to go up for it because people are like, holy moly, gas is $2.95. I got to get it now because it could change next week. Producers are going to try and restrict that back to get those prices to go up so they can make more bang for their buck. Okay. Now let's see if we get this one here. Shoe manufacturer increases prices on all styles. How will this information affect the supply curve for sneakers? What's changing in this problem? All prices. The only thing that is changing is price, not cost of input, nothing else. So instead of causing a shift, this will cause a movement along the curve, right? So say this is the original price point, everything shifts up. So all styles, you're not seeing a cost of input change. So this is a change in quantity supplied, not a change in supply. Okay, robots make automotive assembly faster, cheaper. How will this affect the supply? Well, if it's cheaper and faster to make it, you're going to put more out there, right? Because you can make more money off of them. So you're going to see an increase in supply, shifting to the right. Okay, Congress passes a new sugar tax. How is this going to affect the supply for sugar? Well, you will see it's going to cost the sugar tax, that's going to cost more money to make it. So what's going to happen? Cost of input, cost of production goes up. You're going to see a decrease in supply. Okay, President approves a subsidy for energy industry. How is this going to affect the supply curve for solar energy panels? Well, government's giving money to these businesses, so these businesses now have more money to make product with, so you're going to see them put out more supply. So you're going to see a change to the shift or an increase on the supply curve. All right, so I hope this was informative for you and it's helped dust off some of these concepts as we move into the second half of the week here, where we'll put supply and demand together and see how they interact. Have a wonderful night, and I'll see you tomorrow.